and the back end of the truck actually started to fall off of the cliff with our friend inside. So we decided that we would get in pairs or triads of team members and collectively buy a vehicle for $300. So we went ahead and we bought the vehicles, and we did not disclose to each other what vehicles we were going to use. But we did know kind of roughly the quality of the vehicle that we were going to get. We did say to each other a couple of stipulations, one being that it could not be four-wheel drive. Other than that, really, budget was all that was going to restrain us from doing anything else. We just had no money. But it was good. It was good because it was an opportunity to get out and do something different, to challenge ourselves. And to be honest, none of us had ever been off-road. We may have taken our mom or dad's cars down a dirt trail or something like that, but we had never really done any type of overlanding or any type of an off-road adventure. We made assignments, basic assignments for everybody. We said, okay, you're going to be in charge of water, you're going to be in charge of food, you're going to be in charge of safety equipment, a tow rope in case somebody gets stuck. And we were able to actually wrangle up two other friends that had four-wheel drive vehicles. None of us had four-wheel drive vehicles at the time. So we were able to actually convince these other two friends of ours that had a Chevy Silverado and a Jeep Wrangler to come and be our support vehicles in case we got stuck in the sand or broke down or anything like that. Essentially, we didn't have any idea where we were going. This one individual did. He knew it very well, but the rest of us, it was a blind trip, a real adventure, which is exciting. And so we packed up and we met up at the local parking lot with our cars. Now there was 2 cars in the convoy plus the 2 support vehicles. And they had brought a 2001 or a 2002 Chevy Cavalier. 2-door, orange. This was probably one of the most undesirable cars ever. I was surprised at how new of a vehicle they were able to find for $300, and it did turn out that they had cheated. They spent $450, but still, I mean, $450 for, at that time, only a 7-year-old car. Pretty amazing. Now, our team, we ended up purchasing a 1986 Saab 900. Now, any of you that have seen a Saab 900 know that it is probably the ugliest car imaginable. However, it is probably one of the best built cars ever made. And I didn't have any idea of that until we owned it. We just bought it because it was cheap. We did pick it up for $300 exactly. It had good tires, good brakes. The gentleman that sold us the vehicle said that he was concerned that the brakes were going out. Said that the rear, I think it was the rear drums or the rear discs had some issues, but we really never noticed that. Luckily for us, especially, the brakes never went out. We decided to take that ugly vehicle, make it a little more fun. So we looked at old rally footage from the Saab that was early 80s, late 70s, and kind of copied their paint scheme, the livery on there. We used whatever paint we had. So honestly, all the paint schemes we saw were yellow and blue, but we decided we would go with red and black because that's the paint that we had. We had no money. So we taped off the car and put some red and black stripes on it, laser cut some vinyl graphics, put those on there just to make it more fun. Even spray painted the wheels white to match the rest of the car. The car was white as well. And proceeded to head out on this adventure from where we lived. We headed down to Goblin Valley, which is about 2.5 hours south of where we live. It was interesting because we got to drive the cars really quite a long distance before we challenged them. Now looking back, I probably wouldn't have driven them so far away before taking them off-road into such a challenging environment. And when we arrived to Goblin Valley, it was late on a Friday afternoon. So we camped out just outside of Goblin Valley in our vehicles and in tents. And then the next morning was when we were planning on having the big event. But we got in our vehicles and started driving, and we went down some amazing some amazing roads out in the middle of nowhere, and actually came upon a uranium mining city, abandoned at that point, and there were vehicles there still, and there were little homes that were still there. But obviously it'd been 50, 60 plus years since anybody had lived there. And we took a minute, looked around there, and then thought, if this was a uranium mining town, is it safe to be here? Probably not. All right. So we got back into our cars, kept on driving down the road, and we drove another 30 or 40 minutes before we started asking ourselves, well, I thought we were supposed to be going down kind of like a canyonous area. Where were we going? So we got out, talked with our navigator, looked at the map, and apparently we had missed the route entirely. Where we camped out, we headed off to the west into the desert, when actually we should have headed south back into the main campground where the real trail started, and then we head down that trail. So we went ahead and turned around and headed back towards our campsite, driving that distance again through the uranium mining town, and then out back towards Goblin Valley. Now, if you've ever been to Goblin Valley, you turn left and you can go out and see all the hoodoos and all the freestanding mud sculptures. And if you head to the right, you can actually go down into a canyon that I believe is called Dead Horse Canyon or Wild Horse Canyon, something to that effect. I'll have to look it up. And this canyon is beautiful. There are slot canyons, and there are all kinds of beautiful offshoots that you can go and see. So we went ahead and started heading down that canyon road, and it had a lot of really, really beautiful scenery as we went down this trail. And as we came down the trail, it was pretty reasonably maintained trail. The road was smooth. It was basically a graded gravel road, and we came down. We went down the canyon. As we went down the canyon, we passed the parking lot to the right, which was a trailhead to go hike up this canyon. And we kept on going down the trail, and it was actually a lot of fun because in our cars we had never had a chance to really drive quickly or through heavy terrain. And as we continued to drive down the road, the dirt became softer and softer, and it kept a nice hard pack underneath, so we were able to have a lot of fun with that. Kind of slide the cars around a little bit and have some fun. And pretty soon we came to our first rock obstacle that was simply just, kind of a rock mound in the middle of the road. If you were in a Jeep or something like that, it would be nothing, but in our road cars, it was something. And so we took our time. We kind of went over these rocks and came down into a sandy section and immediately got stuck. And we started, we had to push the cars out. We got everybody together and started pushing the cars. And eventually we got both the Cavalier and the Saab all the way through this kind of sandy section, and got onto some more gravelly sections, and proceeded to do that 3 or 4 more times in the next quarter mile. And it was wearing on us. It was pretty hard work. But then we came to another ledge that actually, instead of going down it, we had to climb up it. And when we went to climb up this ledge, it was a little bit loose, a little bit much for the cars to do. And so with the Cavalier going first, our driver in the Cavalier went up it pretty quickly and actually came up off of the top of the ridge and came down hard and hit the bottom of the front bumper on a rock. And when he did it, the bumper pushed back up into the radiator and cracked the radiator, and immediately we had radiator fluid all over, steam and things like that. But we decided that it wasn't that bad. We'd just keep on putting liquid inside the top of the car and keep going forward. And with the Saab, I decided that I would take a different line to avoid hitting the bottom of the car on that same rock, to avoid mechanical damage. So we did that, and it went out really well. And as we continued down this trail, we had a lot of fun. We became a little bit more careful as we spotted the car, and eventually came to a descent that was bigger than we'd ever expected would be on the trail. And fortunately, there was a bypass around it. There's no way you ever could have driven down it. But it was a waterfall from when the river was running, and the road came up to the top of the waterfall, and there was just a small little cliff edge road that went around the side of the waterfall. And that came, and it went towards, it came up to a kind of a granite slab that would just slide right down into the wash below. So we went ahead and took the Saab up and around, and then the Cavalier and the trucks, and kind of positioned ourselves on the top of this canyon edge, looking down into the canyon. And when we did that, it was the first time any of us had ever really driven a vehicle down a steep, really heavy traction area. And it was pretty exciting because you were almost hanging off of the seatbelt as you went down. It was so steep, but the brakes, luckily in the cars, worked really well. My mind instantly went back to the fact that the gentleman that sold us the Saab had told us that it was likely that the brakes in the back were going bad and they needed to be replaced soon. And as I was sitting there hanging from my seatbelt, that was kind of the first thing that I thought of was, I hope the brakes maintain, because I'm looking straight down at sand at the bottom of this canyon. As we came down off of this rock ledge, I remember really distinctly how soft the sand had become down in this basin area. And we came off the ledge and we kind of kept some momentum and got out and got about 20, 30 feet before we got stuck again. And as we got going again, the trail continued to get tighter and tighter. And I was getting to a point where I was really tired of pushing the cars. So we decided that we'd start going a little bit faster to keep the car on top of the sand, to keep it from sinking down into the sand. And as we continued to go, I came to a corner where I was driving, and it was clearly sandy, and everywhere that there was a corner, there would be a bank turn, and the sand would gather there in a little bit deeper, softer fashion. And as I came around this corner, I noticed that the canyon was closing in tighter and tighter where we were supposed to be driving, and I turned in a little too quickly and hit a boulder on the right-hand side of the car with the back rear tire. And as I did that, this gives you an example of how tight the canyon was. The whole back end of the car kicked over to the left just enough that the back end of the car hit the canyon wall and kind of pinched the car, and then I kind of shot out. After we got through that little section, I came up to a spot where I had good traction and got out to look at the car. And at this point, I looked down, and the back right tire had almost like a pizza shape cut out of, or not cut, but bent out of the rim where I'd hit that rock. The passenger side of the car had a couple scratches, but really nothing at all. But luckily, the tire was still holding air because it was a steel wheel and it had just folded up, but hadn't fully exposed the inside of the bead. So we got a hammer out and just hammered it flat and continued to drive because it was still holding air. The Cavalier had a couple times where it had hit rocks and it nicked and took chunks out of the aluminum because it had aluminum wheels, but it never actually got bad enough that it would cause the tire to deflate. But as we got through that section and kept on going, the canyon eventually opened up larger and larger, and we got to carry some good speed through some open desert plain areas in the canyon, and started passing several of these additional canyons that went up and out of this canyon. The afternoon was getting late, and we're starting to look for, there's supposed to be a exit trail somewhere in that area, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss it by going past these side canyons too quickly. So as we got out and started checking the map, paper map with our GPS tracker, we kind of triangulated where we were at and figured out that we were at the bottom of a canyon area and that we were close to a place called the Muddy River. And there weren't really any other roads on the map that we saw. And we expected that there would be some type of a road or an access road to the river, but we didn't want to take the cars all the way down to the river and then all the way back because with the sand, going uphill in the sand would be really, really difficult. And so we sent the Jeep down, and they went and did a little reconnaissance for us and looked at it, and then came back and let us know that it was about 200 yards of pure mud before it got to the river at all. And in that area, there was absolutely no signs of a road or a path or anything like that. Now, our navigator insisted that there was probably a road on the other side of the river, but that it was just impossible to connect. And the theory was maybe that this trail that we were on was more of a late summer trail where you could connect from where we were to the other side. But looking back, I don't think that was ever the case. So we then looked around and realized that really we were in the middle of nowhere and that we were nearly out of food. Water, we had maybe a gallon left between the 8 of us that were there. We had punctured 2 tires at this point, and we didn't have any extra spares for the truck or for the Cavalier, and that our safety equipment was maybe a little bit lackluster. We had packed, whoever was responsible for the air inflation system had packed an air canister, but no pump and no compressor of any kind. And suddenly we realized that we were a little bit of a dire situation. We didn't know where we were. We didn't know how to get out. We didn't have clear instructions on where we were, how to get out, where a trail was. We were down on water, and it was probably about 110 degrees outside, really, really quite warm. And suddenly we just panicked a little bit. We realized that we needed to leave, but we didn't have a way out. And if you've ever been in the desert with no water on a hot day, it creates a little bit of a panic for you. So we decided that we would do a little bit more reconnaissance, and I jumped in the Saab with my brother-in-law, and we drove up one of these side canyons fairly quickly, probably too quickly, because as we were doing it, I remembered vividly the desire to not get stuck in the sand. And so as we were going up this canyon, uphill in sand, I did my best to keep the car going as fast as I could. And as I went faster and faster, I realized that I could kind of start cutting some corners to stay on top of the rock and stay out of the sand. And what happened was I started cutting these corners and kind of jumping the car little by little. And one of these times that I came around the corner, I looked through and I could see straight through the plant life that was growing just on the ridge of the sandy banked area, and that it was clear on the other side. And I looked to the left and I could see there was boulder, like kind of little gravelly, grapefruit-sized boulders that I'd have to slow down for and kind of drive around on the left-hand side. So I decided to cut the corner and go through there. And at that point, I was going fairly quickly and was carrying good speed. And we went through, and as I came through the plants, I looked down and I could see that there was a large ditch on the back side of this wash that I couldn't see from the other side. And as we came down, we went straight down into this dip and came back up the other side of it, and the car literally just kicked up. As it kicked up, it felt like just holding onto an amusement park ride. We hit, and we went straight up, and then we came straight down, and at that point I thought, oh, I just broke the car. The miracle is that the car landed, didn't skip a beat. We must have hit some soft enough sand that nothing really got damaged, but we landed and just kept on going. And maybe 100 feet past that, there were these trees hanging over the trail. And again, my instinct was, I don't want to get stuck in the sand. The trucks can make it if they want to, but I don't want to get stuck in the sand. So we went and we kept our speed going and drove into these overhanging tree limbs coming down, hanging in front of the car. And my brother and I, again, we kind of ducked behind the dashboard and the steering wheel as the branches came flying past us, hitting the windshield. And fortunately enough for us, the windshield didn't break and everything went just fine, and no issues whatsoever. And we continued to fly up this canyon and got to a point where we came around a corner and my heart just sank. I remember very clearly seeing these giant boulders strewn all the way across the canyon. And on the other side of the canyon, or other side of these boulders, there was just another nice smooth sandy wash, kept on going up and out of the canyon, but there was no way that we could get these cars out past these boulders. And so we looked at the car, inspected it. We had been driving pretty carelessly for the last 2 miles or so. And every single one of the wheels looked like a bottle cap, little nicks and grooves all the way around each one of them. Nothing bad enough to cause us to worry about losing air, but all of them were beat up. And we realized we needed to take a little more care of the car and take a little bit slower as we went back down the canyon. And so we did. We went back down the canyon and met up with our companions, where we decided to do the next round of how to get out planning, because at this point we realized that we really might die in the desert. At that point we came back down to where the truck was, the other car, the Cavalier, and the Jeep, and we kind of reported back what we'd found. And we had a little bit of a panic moment, of course, where everybody still in the group was worried about the fact that we had no more food, no more water. Our equipment was a little bit lackluster. We didn't have any safety equipment anymore. And we were a little bit of in a frenzy at that point. And we quickly decided that we would leave the 2 cars in the Gully and pack everything in the truck and the Jeep and then drive back the way that we came because we knew where that went. So we quickly loaded everything back into the truck and the Jeep. And at that point, the owner of the Jeep actually was undoing a bungee strap on his truck. And this bungee strap was running back across the entire opening of the rear of the truck, or of the Jeep. And it came loose and came back and hit him square in the face and actually cut all the way through the top of his lip, just below his nose, down into where his teeth were. And we had blood everywhere. So we got in the truck and in the Jeep and with all of our gear. The truck was severely overloaded because we had everything in the back of that truck. But we proceeded to drive out of the canyon without really any issue. And what happened was when we got to that big waterfall, all of us looked at the waterfall and remembered how steep it was and that we came down this big ledge and that big sandy section down below. And we opted to get out of the car and let the Jeep go first because it was a little bit lighter and could get through there without issue. And then if we needed to, we could always use the Jeep to pull the truck through the sand if the truck got stuck. So we sent the Jeep up without trouble and then drove the truck through and through the sand up onto this granite slab, and he proceeded to drive up the slab without really any issue at all. The truck was fantastic. But as he transitioned from the granite slab onto the dirt ledge, the little cliff edge that ran between the granite section and the waterfall section, the ground actually broke out below the truck, and the back end of the truck actually started to fall off of the cliff with our friend inside. And as this happened, luckily he was a seasoned driver. He had spent a lot of time in that truck, and he reacted perfectly. He gave it the gas. He was already in 4-wheel drive and basically clawed his way back up onto the hillside before it could get too far down the hill. And at that point, he kept on driving up that cliff edge onto solid ground where he was able to take a break and gather himself, because at that point we were all watching as the back end of that truck swung out and was hanging above us. A situation you never want to be in at all, let alone in the middle of the desert. And that was our last miracle of getting out of there safely. At that point, all of us were able to get back in the truck, drive out of the canyon for another little while. I can't remember how long it took, but it was much faster to leave than to come in because we didn't have the 2 cars anymore. And we were in 4-wheel drive, able to get through everything very, very quickly. As we exited the canyon, we came up and we drove back to the ranger station, and we then went and we told the ranger what we had done, where we had driven down this trail, and that the cars were stuck down there for now and that we were going to come and get them out. And what happened was the ranger, she listened to us. We showed her on the map where we were at, and she was a little bit shocked, because what we had done was actually not driven down the road at all. We had left the road back where that parking lot was. That was actually where the road ended. And we had proceeded to drive down Little Wild Horse Canyon without a road. We had driven down the wash of the canyon, which changes every season depending on how the floods are. And where the cars were currently parked was actually a heavy floodplain that would flood if there was any heavy rain up in the mountains nearby. And so she instructed us. We weren't in the middle of a flood season. We'd have a couple weeks to get the cars out of there, but was generally shocked that we were able to get cars in there at all, let alone being 4-wheel drive cars, but let alone being regular cars. Even 4-wheel drive cars should not have been able to get in and out of that area, according to this ranger. And so we proceeded to pack up and leave and drive home without any more issues. And when I got home, being extremely tired and worn out, this being a late Saturday night, counted my blessings and then decided what I wanted to do. And that was to post the car on Craigslist for free to anybody that wants it. And the next day I had somebody come and offer to purchase the car for no dollars. And I proceeded to give them the location of the car, had them sign the title and a waiver saying that it was theirs as is, where is. The where is part was very important to me. And washed my hands of that vehicle. Now, this person that came to purchase the vehicle from me actually ended up working at the same office building as the owner of the Cavalier, which I had no idea. They didn't know each other or anything like that, but turns out that they then planned a extraction together. And the owners of the Cavalier, the Jeep, and now the new Saab owner proceeded to go down to Goblin Valley for the next 3 weekends with four-wheel drives, four-wheelers, and come-alongs. And it took them a full 3 weekends to get those cars out of there. So at that point, I realized that selling the car for $0 was the best $300 I ever spent. And I got my weekends back.